My daughter banned me from her wedding for not speaking French. I'm Chuck Bennett, and apparently I was too linguistically embarrassing for Paris. Victoria was marrying French aristocracy in an $890,000 castle wedding that I funded completely. Every last penny. But when she told Pierre's family I couldn't attend because I don't speak the language and would embarrass everyone, I decided to respond in a way that was perfectly clear in any language. What she didn't know about my French was about to cost her everything. As we say in France, the truth always comes out in the end. The truth always comes out. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from, in any language. This story starts with a voicemail that changed everything. Victoria's voice, cold and calculated, telling me I wasn't sophisticated enough for her perfect day. But sophistication isn't about what language you speak. It's about remembering who built your opportunities to speak it. The first time Victoria showed her shame, I thought it was nerves. This was back in March, at her engagement party. Pierre's parents flew in from Normandy. Distinguished people. His father owns vineyards. His mother collects antique furniture. I walked up to introduce myself. Pierre's mother, Madame Laurent, smiled politely, started speaking in accented English. "You must be so proud of Victoria," she said. "She speaks such beautiful French." I opened my mouth to respond. Victoria appeared instantly. "Dad doesn't do languages," she announced, physically steering me away. "He's more of a hands-on person." Pierre's mother looked confused. I felt heat rise in my face, but I stayed quiet. Victoria was nervous about impressing them. I understood. The second incident was worse. 2 weeks later, Victoria invited me to meet Pierre's grandfather, Andre. This man built a construction empire across Europe. I was excited. Finally, someone who'd understand my business. Andre started talking about restoration work on old castles. His passion was obvious. I leaned forward, ready to share my experience with historical building techniques. "Papa Andre," Victoria interrupted, "Dad doesn't really understand European architecture." She turned to me with that patronizing smile. "Grandpa Andre is talking about very complex restoration methods. It's probably over your head." Andre looked embarrassed for me. I sat there like a fool while Victoria translated basic construction concepts I knew better than she did. That night, I asked her about it. "Honey, why do you keep cutting me off?" "Dad, these people are sophisticated. They discuss art, literature, French wine culture. You're amazing at what you do, but this is different." Different. Like I was some kind of cultural caveman. "Your construction work is incredible," she continued, "but Pierre's family expects intellectual conversation, European refinement, languages." I watched my daughter speak about me like I was a project to manage, not a father who'd sacrificed everything for her education. "I'm trying to protect you from feeling out of place," she said. Protect me from feeling out of place. But she never asked where I'd been. Never wondered how a simple construction worker could afford her Columbia University education, her year abroad in France, her $2,800 a month Manhattan apartment. She never asked why I sometimes murmured things under my breath when frustrated. Words that weren't quite English. Victoria had constructed an image of me that fit her narrative. The hardworking but unsophisticated father. The man who built buildings but couldn't build sentences in civilized languages. 3 months later, wedding plans intensified. Victoria hired a coordinator named Celeste, who spoke French exclusively during planning meetings. "I'll handle communication with the French vendors," Victoria announced. "Dad, you just focus on writing checks." Writing checks. That's what I'd become. The worst part? Pierre's family kept trying to include me. Andre would ask about my work. His wife wanted to know about American construction methods. But Victoria always intervened, always protected them from my supposed ignorance. "Dad's English isn't even that great," I heard her tell Pierre once. "Imagine him trying French." My English wasn't even that great. This from the daughter I'd raised, speaking proper grammar, because education mattered to me. The daughter whose college essays I'd edited line by line. But she never bothered to ask about my years in France. Never wondered why I chose French architecture books for my office. Never questioned how I managed international business deals. She'd decided who I was. and who I wasn't allowed to be. The voicemail that shattered everything came on August 15th, exactly 48 hours before her wedding. If I stayed silent about Victoria's language ultimatum, I'd lose more than respect. I'd lose my identity. 30 years of sacrifice were being erased because my daughter decided I wasn't sophisticated enough for her new family. Everything I'd built meant nothing if she could dismiss me as culturally inferior. Let me tell you what those 30 years looked like. When Victoria's mother Sarah died of cancer, Victoria was 12. I was 35, running Bennett Brothers Construction with my brother Joey. Sarah's medical bills had depleted our savings. I had two choices: scale back Victoria's education or find a way to earn more. I chose Europe. 1997, I took my first international contract: restoration work on a castle outside Paris. The pay was double American rates, but I'd be away 6 months. Victoria cried when I left. "Don't go, Daddy." "I have to, sweetheart, for your future." I spent those 6 months learning more than construction techniques. I absorbed French culture, studied their architectural traditions, listened to how they discussed craftsmanship. Not because I had to, because I wanted to understand the places I was working. The French crews respected that. They taught me wine regions while we rebuilt stone walls, explained Gothic versus Romanesque techniques while we restored flying buttresses. More contracts followed: 1998, 1999, 2000. Each time Victoria got older. Each time I got better at French, at understanding European business culture, at appreciating what these historical buildings represented. By 2005, Bennett Brothers was handling international restoration exclusively. We'd rebuilt sections of castles across Normandy, restored churches in Provence, renovated historical buildings in Lyon. I wasn't just learning French, I was living it. Victoria knew I traveled to France for work, but she never asked details, never wondered what languages I spoke there. She was busy with high school, then college, then her career at an art gallery. She studied French literature at Columbia, spent junior year in Bordeaux, came home talking about French sophistication like she'd discovered it. I was proud of her passion, never corrected her assumptions about my knowledge. Why would I? She was finding herself, but now those assumptions were costing us both. If I accepted being banned from her wedding for not speaking French, I'd validate every prejudice about working class intelligence. I'd confirm that construction workers can't appreciate culture. That American hands-on experience is inferior to European academic study. Worse, I'd teach Victoria that money without sophistication's just charity, that her father was good enough to fund her dreams, but not refined enough to witness them. The financial stakes were massive too. Wedding costs had reached $890,000. The castle rental, $145,000. Catering for 250 guests, $89,000. Victoria's custom Vera Wang dress, $23,000. Flowers by Jacques Laurent, $67,000. But money was just paper. The real loss would be generational. Victoria was choosing Pierre's family's approval over her father's dignity. If I accepted that, I'd be teaching her that respect is negotiable, that family hierarchy depends on perceived sophistication. My future grandchildren would learn that Grandpa Chuck was the man who paid for everything but wasn't cultured enough to attend family celebrations. The American grandfather who spoke only one language and built only simple things. That narrative would poison every relationship I'd ever have with Victoria's future family. But there was something else, something Victoria didn't know about her unsophisticated father. The castle where she was getting married, Malmaison Castle replica in Loire Valley. I'd been negotiating with Marie-Claire Dubois, the property manager, for 3 years. Not just as a vendor, as the new owner. The irony was perfect. Victoria was marrying into French sophistication at a castle her linguistically embarrassing father owned. Time to teach her about assumptions, and I'd do it entirely in French. The phone call that triggered everything happened at 11:47 p.m. on August 13th. I was in my Portland office, reviewing final wire transfers for wedding expenses. My phone rang. Victoria's number. "Dad, we need to talk." Her tone was cold, professional, like she was firing an employee. What's wrong, honey? Pierre's family has expressed some concerns about the wedding reception. Concerns, not requests. Concerns. What kind of concerns? Language barriers, cultural differences. They're worried about awkwardness. I sat up straighter. Awkwardness from what? Dad, his family only speaks French at formal dinners. They're very traditional, very sophisticated. They expect guests to participate in French conversation. And? And you don't speak French? There it was. Flat statement. No question about whether I might have learned some basics. No curiosity about my years working in France. Victoria, I think you're underestimating. Dad, I'm trying to protect you. Can you imagine sitting at the head table, unable to understand anything? You'd be miserable. She was protecting me again, from my own supposed ignorance. So what are you suggesting? The rehearsal dinner is completely French-speaking. Pierre's grandfather specifically requested no English translations. He wants authentic French family atmosphere. Okay. Dad, you can't come to the rehearsal dinner. Silence. I stared at my office wall, lined with photos from construction projects across France. Photos Victoria had never bothered asking about. You're uninviting me from your rehearsal dinner because I don't speak French. I'm sparing you from an embarrassing situation. And the wedding? Long pause. Then the words that changed everything. Dad, Pierre's family has traditions. The wedding ceremony will include French vows, French readings, French music. The reception features French wines with detailed explanations in French. The toasts will be in French. Victoria. You'd sit there for 4 hours understanding nothing. You'd look confused and lost. It would be uncomfortable for everyone. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Are you asking me not to attend my daughter's wedding? I'm asking you to consider what's best for everyone. Answer the question. Another pause. When she spoke, her voice was steel. Yes, I think you should skip the wedding ceremony and reception. You can come to the informal brunch the next morning. That will be casual, in English. The informal brunch, like a consolation prize for the linguistically inferior father. Let me understand this. I'm paying $890,000 for a wedding I'm too stupid to attend. Dad, don't be dramatic. This isn't about intelligence. It's about cultural sophistication. Cultural sophistication? Pierre's family expects certain standards. They discuss wine regions, architectural history, French literature. These aren't your areas. Not my areas. The woman whose Columbia education I'd funded was lecturing me about architectural history. Victoria, I've been working in France for... Dad, I've studied French culture extensively. I lived in Bordeaux for a year. I understand these people's expectations. She understood. After 1 year abroad, she understood French culture better than her father, who'd worked there for decades. Pierre's family are sophisticated Europeans. They appreciate subtlety, refinement, intellectual discourse. They would never intentionally make you feel excluded, but I'd embarrass myself trying to participate. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I looked at my desk drawer. Inside were contracts written in French, business correspondence with Marie Claire about castle renovations, letters from French construction crews thanking Monsieur Charles for his cultural sensitivity. Victoria, what if I told you, Dad, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm trying to start my marriage without family drama. Pierre's grandfather is paying close attention to how this wedding represents their family values. Family values. The values that excluded the bride's father for insufficient sophistication. So your solution's to pretend I don't exist. My solution's to acknowledge reality. You're amazing at construction work. You built an incredible business, but this is different. This requires cultural knowledge you don't have. I stood up slowly, walked to my office window. Outside, Portland's lights stretched toward the mountains. Behind me, 30 years of international business relationships hung on the walls. Okay, Victoria. Okay, what? I understand your position. Relief flooded her voice. Thank you, Dad. I knew you'd be reasonable about this. The brunch will be lovely. You'll get to meet everyone in a comfortable setting. Comfortable setting, where her linguistically challenged father wouldn't embarrass the sophisticated Europeans. Victoria? Yes? I need to make some phone calls tonight. About what? Wedding arrangements. 3 phone calls, actually, all in perfect French. Time to teach my daughter about cultural assumptions. After Victoria hung up, I sat in my office staring at evidence she'd never bothered to discover. The first item was a diploma from the Defense Language Institute, Monterey, California, dated 1989. Certificate of Proficiency in French Language. Score 3+3+, Professional Working Proficiency Plus. I'd earned it during my Army service at age 26. The second was a business contract from 1997, written entirely in French. My first castle restoration project. I'd negotiated every clause myself. No translator needed. The French contractors had been impressed by my technical vocabulary. The third was a letter from Marie-Claire Dubois, dated 6 months ago. Dear Mr. Charles, it began, your understanding of French construction heritage continues to amaze our restoration teams. Victoria had never seen these documents, never asked about my military background, never wondered why I chose European projects over easier American contracts. She'd constructed a fantasy about my limitations based on zero evidence, but she was about to discover the difference between assuming and knowing. I opened my laptop and reviewed the castle purchase documents. Bennett Holdings LLC had acquired Malmaison Castle replica through a shell company in April. Total investment, $8.7 million. Marie-Claire managed the property for me, handling bookings and events, including Victoria's wedding. The irony was delicious. Victoria was getting married at a castle owned by her linguistically embarrassing father. She'd been planning her dream wedding at my property, dismissing me as culturally inferior while I negotiated renovation details with French artisans. My phone rang. Joey's number. Chuck, you sound terrible. What happened? I explained Victoria's ultimatum. Joey whistled low. She uninvited you from your own daughter's wedding? Because I don't speak French. The same French you've been speaking to contractors for 25 years? She doesn't know I speak French. Long pause. How does she not know? Good question. How had I hidden my language skills from my own daughter for decades? The answer was simple. I'd never needed to prove them to her. When Victoria was young, I'd speak French to business contacts when she wasn't around. During her teenage years, she was too busy with school activities to notice my international calls. In college, she was too focused on her own French studies to question mine. By the time she became an adult, I was Dad the construction guy in her mind. The man who provided financial support but couldn't possibly match her intellectual sophistication. I'd let her believe it because I was proud of her academic achievements. Why compete with your daughter's education? Why overshadow her excitement about discovering French culture? But now those good intentions were backfiring. Joey, I need a favor. Name it. Call Jean-Luc Moreau in Lyon. Ask him to send testimonials about our work in French. Jean-Luc was my oldest French business partner. We'd restored 12 historical buildings together. He considered me one of the most culturally sensitive Americans he'd ever worked with. You're planning something. I'm planning to educate my daughter about assumptions. Next, I called my attorney, Patricia Hamilton. Patricia, I need you to prepare documentation about Bennett Holdings' European assets. The castle portfolio? Everything. Properties, valuations, business relationships. I want a complete picture of our French operations. Chuck, what's going on? I explained Victoria's cultural assessment of my capabilities. Patricia laughed. She doesn't know you own the wedding venue. She doesn't know I speak French. The woman who majored in French literature doesn't know her father is fluent in French. Apparently, construction workers don't qualify for linguistic sophistication. When do you need this documentation? Tomorrow morning. I'll have everything ready by 8 a.m. The third call was the most important. I dialed Marie-Claire's number in France. Time difference made it 6 a.m. there, but she answered on the second ring. Hello, Mr. Charles. Hello, Marie-Claire. How are you? Very well, thank you. But you seem worried. What's going on? I explained the situation in French. Victoria's assumptions about my language skills. Her decision to ban me from the wedding for cultural insufficiency. Marie-Claire was speechless. Your daughter doesn't know that you speak French? No. And she doesn't know that I own the castle. My God, what do you want to do? What did I want to do? Good question. Marie Claire, I need you to call Victoria tomorrow. Tell her there's been a complication with the wedding arrangements. What kind of complication? Tell her the castle owner wants to personally review the event details. Tell her he's concerned about cultural authenticity. Mr. Charles, that's wonderful. She'll have to speak with you. In French. Of course, in French. We spent 30 minutes planning the conversation. Marie Claire would set up a conference call between Victoria and the castle owner to discuss wedding protocols. Victoria would have to demonstrate her French sophistication to the property owner. The property owner who'd been speaking French longer than she'd been alive. Marie Claire, one more thing. I want you to record our conversation with Victoria. For what? Proof. For later. Understood. Monsieur Charles? Yes? Your daughter is going to learn an important lesson. Yes. Victoria was about to learn a very important lesson about cultural assumptions. I hung up and stared at the wedding invoices. 890 hazwa for a celebration I was apparently too unsophisticated to attend. But sophistication isn't about where you studied or what degrees you earned. It's about respecting the people who made your education possible. Time to remind Victoria about respect, in any language she preferred. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be my final humiliation. Instead, it became my launching pad. August 16th, 7 p.m., Le Bernardin Restaurant, Manhattan. 53 guests gathered to celebrate Victoria and Pierre's union. Pierre's entire family flew in from France. Victoria's friends from Colombia. Her colleagues from the art gallery. I wasn't invited, but I went anyway. Not to crash the dinner, to deliver the wedding gifts Victoria had forgotten to pick up. At least that was my excuse. I arrived at 6:45 p.m., carrying an elaborate package from Tiffany & Company. Victoria had ordered custom crystal champagne flutes with the Laurent family crest. She'd been too busy with last-minute preparations to collect them. The maitre d' recognized me from previous family celebrations. Monsieur Bennett, bonsoir. Bonsoir, Philippe. I just need to deliver something to my daughter's table. He led me toward the private dining room. Through the glass doors, I could see Victoria holding court, gesturing elegantly, while Pierre's family listened with polite attention. Perfect timing. I entered just as Victoria was explaining something to Pierre's grandmother, Madame Laurent. Papa Chuck is wonderful at construction work, but he's more comfortable with practical things. Cultural sophistication isn't really his area. Practical things, not cultural sophistication. Pierre's grandfather, Andre, looked uncomfortable. But surely he has business experience with European projects. Oh, he's traveled to France for work, Victoria laughed. But you know how it is with American contractors? They stick to English-speaking crews. Very practical people. Very practical people. Translation, culturally limited. Pierre's mother leaned forward. We were hoping to discuss French architectural traditions with him. Construction heritage is Andre's passion. I'm afraid Dad wouldn't be able to contribute much to that conversation, Victoria said. His expertise is more hands-on, actual building rather than historical analysis. I cleared my throat from the doorway. Victoria! Her face went white. Everyone turned to stare at the uninvited father delivering forgotten wedding gifts. Dad, what are you doing here? Bringing your crystal champagne flutes? You forgot to pick them up. I set the Tiffany package on the table. The Laurent family watched with polite curiosity. Thank you, Victoria said coldly. You can leave them with Philippe. Already handled. I turned to go, then stopped. Andre was studying me with intelligent eyes. This was a man who'd built construction empires across Europe, a man who understood the difference between hands-on expertise and cultural ignorance. Monsieur Bennett, Andre said in careful English, Victoria tells us you work in construction. That's correct? What type of projects? Victoria started to answer for me. Dad does mostly. I held up a hand, gentle but firm. Historical restoration primarily. Castellax, churches, government buildings. Mostly in France, some in Italy. Andre's eyebrows rose. Historical restoration? That requires significant cultural knowledge. Victoria laughed nervously. Dad, you're being modest. Tell them about your regular construction work. I am telling them about my regular construction work. Silence. Victoria looked confused. Pierre's mother leaned forward. Monsieur Bennet, which regions of France? Normandy, Provence, Loire Valley? Some work in Burgundy. Loire Valley? Andre's voice sharpened. Which castles? Victoria started to panic. Dad, they're asking about very specific Chambord Castle Exterior Restoration, 2018-2019. Chenonceau Castle Structural Repairs, 2020. Currently working on Malmaison Castle Replica Renovation. Dead silence. Andre stared at me. You worked on Chambord? South Facade Restoration. Limestone Replacement. Flying Buttress Reinforcement. Mon Dieu, Andre whispered. I consulted on that project. The American contractor who preserved the original masonry techniques. Chuck Bennett, Bennett Brothers Construction. Andre stood up slowly, extended his hand. Monsieur Bennett, I am honored to meet you. Victoria's mouth fell open. You consulted on that project? My company specializes in French historical preservation, Andre said. Your father's work on Chambord is legendary. He refused to use modern shortcuts that would compromise architectural integrity. I shook Andre's hand. The French craftsman taught me everything I know about respecting historical techniques. In what language did they teach you? Pierre's mother asked quietly. Victoria's face went pale. I smiled. French, mostly. Some regional dialects. The table erupted in excited French conversation. Andre started asking detailed questions about construction techniques. Pierre's mother wanted to know about specific restoration challenges. Victoria sat frozen while I answered everything fluently. Not just answered, contributed insights about French construction heritage that impressed the entire table. After 10 minutes of animated French discussion, I checked my watch. I should let you return to your rehearsal dinner. Monsieur Bennet, Andre said, would you join us? We would be honored. Victoria found her voice. Actually, Dad has other commitments tonight. No commitments, I said. But this is your rehearsal dinner, Victoria. Your night with Pierre's family. I looked directly at her. Besides, you mentioned language barriers might make things awkward. Her face flushed red. Pierre's grandmother, who'd been silent until now, spoke up in perfect English. Monsieur Bennet, your daughter has been telling us wonderful stories about your construction work, but she never mentioned your expertise in French historical preservation. Dad's modest, Victoria managed. Or perhaps, Pierre's mother said gently, you never asked about the details of his work. The room went quiet. I'll let you enjoy your dinner, I said. Victoria, we should probably discuss wedding arrangements tomorrow. What arrangements? The castle owner wants to personally review cultural protocols for the ceremony. Victoria looked confused. What castle owner? Marie Claire will call you in the morning to set up a conference. I nodded to the Laurent family. Mesdames et messieurs, bon appétit. I left them staring at Victoria, who'd suddenly realized her linguistically embarrassing father had just conducted sophisticated cultural conversation in fluent French with her fiancé's family. But that was just the warm-up. Tomorrow, she'd learn who really owned her fairy tale wedding venue. Marie Claire called Victoria at exactly 9 a.m. Paris time, 3 a.m. New York time. Victoria answered groggily, probably expecting wedding vendor updates. Hello, Miss Bennet. This is Marie Claire Dubois, the manager of the Castle de Malmaison. Victoria struggled to switch to French. Good morning, Marie Claire. Is there a problem? Not exactly a problem, but the castle owner would like to discuss the cultural protocols for your wedding personally. A personal discussion about cultural protocols. Victoria was wide awake now. The owner? I thought you were responsible for all the details. Normally, yes, but this ceremony is very important. The owner wants to ensure that everything adheres to authentic French traditions. Victoria's French was decent but formal, textbook grammar with an American accent. She was clearly struggling with Marie Claire's rapid colloquial delivery. When would he like to speak? Now, if possible. He can do a conference call. Now. The castle owner wanted to discuss wedding protocols now, 36 hours before the ceremony. Okay. How do we organize this conference? Marie Claire gave her a conference number. Victoria scrambled for a pen, repeating digits in stilted French. The owner will be online in 15 minutes. Be prepared to discuss the cultural details in French. Cultural details in French. Victoria's worst nightmare was coming true. She had to prove her French sophistication to the castle owner who controlled her wedding venue. She had no idea she was about to negotiate with her father. 15 minutes later, Victoria dialed the conference number. Marie Claire answered first. "Good morning, Miss Bennet. The owner will join us immediately." A click. Then a male voice speaking perfect French with a slight Normandy accent. "Hello, I am Charles Bennet, owner of the Malmaison Castle." Victoria's brain short-circuited, but this couldn't be her father. This man was speaking fluent, sophisticated French. Regional accent, business terminology she barely understood. "Good morning, Mr. Bennet," she managed. "I'm Victoria Bennet Laurent, the bride." "Ah, Miss Bennet Laurent. I've heard a lot about you." He'd heard a lot about her. That was ominous. "Marie Claire says you want to discuss cultural protocols." "In French, please. It's important to maintain the authenticity of the event." Victoria's hands started sweating. "Of course. Which protocols worry you?" "I'm concerned about cultural respect during the ceremony. Marie Claire tells me your family has some interesting perspectives about French sophistication." Victoria's blood ran cold. Had Marie Claire reported her comments about her father? "I don't understand. What are the prospects?" "For example, the assumption that Americans who work in construction cannot appreciate French culture." Oh God, Marie Claire had definitely been listening to their conversations. "Mr. Bennet, I assure you that my family greatly respects French culture." "Really? Then why did you tell my property manager that your father doesn't speak French and would embarrass everyone at a sophisticated French wedding?" The words hit like physical blows. Victoria sat in stunned silence. "Mr. Bennet, there has been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. You told her your father is just a construction worker who doesn't do languages. You said he lacks cultural sophistication." Victoria's world was collapsing. The castle owner had recorded her insulting her own father. "Sir, my father is wonderful, but he doesn't speak French, and Pierre's family—" "Stop," the voice said sharply. "We continue in French only." Victoria struggled to compose her thoughts in French. "My father is wonderful, but he doesn't speak French, and Pierre's family—" "Your father doesn't speak French?" "No, sir." "How do you know this?" The question caught her off guard. "Pardon? How do you know your father doesn't speak French? Have you ever tested his language skills?" "Well, no, but have you ever asked him about his work in France?" "He works in France, but with teams that speak English." "English-speaking crews?" The voice became amused. "Mademoiselle, I've worked with your father for 3 years. Our entire relationship is conducted in French." Victoria's phone slipped from her hand. When she picked it up, the voice was continuing. "Your father speaks better French than most Frenchmen I know. His knowledge of construction heritage is extraordinary. His cultural sensitivity is why I chose Bennett Brothers for castle restoration." That's impossible." "Why is it impossible?" Because he never told me. Or perhaps you never asked." Silence stretched across the phone line. "Mademoiselle Bennet Laurent, your father is one of the most culturally sophisticated Americans I've ever worked with. He speaks French fluently, understands European architecture better than most professors, and has spent 20 years preserving French heritage." Victoria was crying now. "But he lets me translate for him. He never corrects my French." "Because he's proud of your education. Why would a father compete with his daughter's achievements?" "I don't understand. Your father could have embarrassed you many times by demonstrating superior French skills. He chose to let you feel sophisticated instead." The truth was devastating. Victoria had been patronizing her father while he graciously accepted her condescension. "Monsieur Bennet, what do you want me to do?" "I want you to call your father and apologize, not just for the wedding ban, for years of cultural arrogance. And if I don't, then your wedding is canceled." "You can't cancel my wedding. I own the venue. I can do whatever I want." "But the contracts—" "Read Clause 15. 15. Cultural sensitivity requirement. Discriminating against family members for perceived cultural inadequacy violates our agreements." Victoria scrambled for her wedding contracts. Found Clause 15. Cultural sensitivity and family inclusion were indeed required for venue rental. "This is my wedding. This is my property, and your father is my business partner." "Business partner?" Bennett Brothers Construction has been restoring this castle for 3 years. Your father isn't just a client, he's the owner. The phone line went dead silent. The owner, Victoria whispered. Your linguistically embarrassing father owns the castle where you plan to celebrate your cultural superiority. Victoria was sobbing now. Daddy? Yes, sweetheart. It's Daddy. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I never asked. No, you assumed. You decided who I was without ever finding out who I actually am. Daddy, please don't cancel my wedding. Victoria, I would never cancel your wedding, but I won't pay for an event where I'm not welcome. You are welcome. You're so welcome. Please come. Bring whoever you want. In what capacity? As the culturally inferior father who needs protection from sophisticated conversation? As my dad, who I'm proud of, who I should have been proud of all along. I let her cry for a minute. Victoria, yes? Your wedding is tomorrow. We have work to do. What kind of work? Teaching Pierre's family that assumptions about Americans are as dangerous as assumptions about the French. How do we do that? We start by you treating your father with the respect he's earned. I will, Daddy. I promise I will. For the first time in months, Victoria called me Daddy. It was a start. Victoria's apology was sincere, but apologies don't erase humiliation. She needed to understand consequences. More importantly, Pierre's family needed to learn that cultural prejudice works both ways. I spent August 17th, wedding day, demonstrating exactly how sophisticated the simple American contractor could be. The castle transformation began at 6 a.m. Marie Claire had arranged for the most prestigious French vendors to handle last-minute additions, not the original wedding vendors, the suppliers who handled diplomatic events for the Élysée Palace. Florist, Maison Moulin, Paris. They specialize in authentic French garden arrangements, not the generic castle style Victoria had originally ordered. Wine, direct from André Fontaine's personal cellar. Not purchased wine. Wines from Pierre's grandfather's private collection, selected to complement specific French regional cuisine. Music, the Versailles Baroque Ensemble. Not a wedding band, a historical music ensemble that performs authentic French classical pieces. Catering, Le Grand Vefour's traveling team. Not local catering, the same team that handles state dinners for foreign dignitaries. Total cost for these upgrades, $340,000, all arranged through my French business connections. All conversations conducted entirely in French. All documentation provided in French with no English translation. When Pierre's family arrived at the castle, they found an event that exceeded their highest cultural expectations. André approached me immediately. Monsieur Charles, this is extraordinary. How did you arrange Maison Moulin on such short notice? 25 years of relationships, André. Pierre's mother examined the wine list. These are bottles from our family cellar. How did you know which vintages would complement the menu? I've been studying French wine regions since Victoria started learning to walk. The music ensemble began their performance, authentic 17th century French ceremonial pieces. Pierre's grandmother started crying. This music, it's what they played at my parents' wedding in 1952? I asked Marie Claire about family musical traditions, I explained. She suggested historical authenticity would honor your heritage. Victoria stood speechless, watching her uncultured father orchestrate cultural sophistication that surpassed anything she'd planned. But the real education came during the ceremony itself. The officiant was Père François Dubois, Marie Claire's uncle, a Catholic priest who specialized in bilingual ceremonies for international families. Instead of the generic bilingual service Victoria had planned, Father Francis conducted the ceremony in 3 distinct phases. First phase, traditional French vows, spoken in classical French. Pierre and Victoria exchanged promises using formal language dating back 3 centuries. Second phase, contemporary American vows, acknowledging the cultural bridge their marriage represented. Third phase, a blessing in both languages, honoring both families' contributions to the union. During the French phase, I served as Victoria's translator when she struggled with classical vocabulary. Not because she needed protection, because I wanted to demonstrate parental support instead of cultural competition. Andre whispered to Pierre's mother during my translations, "This man's French is more sophisticated than most university professors." Pierre's grandmother leaned toward Victoria. "Your father is remarkable, such cultural sensitivity." But the most powerful moment came during the reception. Andre stood for a toast. He'd prepared remarks in both English and French, wanting to honor both families. He began in English, to Pierre and Victoria, two young people bridging cultures, then switched to French for family-specific comments, and to the Laurent family, who joyfully welcomed this beautiful American woman. Finally, he turned to me, and to Mr. Charles Bennett, whose cultural wisdom reminds us that sophistication comes from respect, not education, whose knowledge of French heritage surpasses most Frenchmen, whose generosity created this perfect celebration of both our cultures. He raised his glass to Charles Bennett, who proves that true class transcends language barriers. The French family applauded enthusiastically. Victoria was crying again, but these were different tears. Pride in her father. Finally. During dinner, Pierre's cousins approached our table. They'd been skeptical about the American construction worker joining their sophisticated family. "Monsieur Bennett," Pierre's cousin Jean-Philippe said in French, "we owe you an apology. Victoria told us you weren't comfortable with French conversation." "Victoria was protecting me from feeling excluded," I replied in French. She didn't want her father to feel culturally inadequate. "But your French is perfect. Your knowledge of our architecture is extraordinary. 25 years of work teaches you things university classes can't." Jean-Philippe looked ashamed. "We assumed American contractor meant, I know what you assumed. The same thing my daughter assumed." But Pierre's mother joined the conversation. "How do we make amends for such prejudice?" "By remembering that assumptions about culture work both ways. Americans aren't necessarily unsophisticated. French people aren't necessarily pretentious. People are individuals." The evening continued with genuine cultural exchange. Pierre's family shared stories about French heritage. I shared experiences from restoration projects. Victoria listened to conversations she'd never known her father could contribute to. At midnight, Marie-Claire pulled me aside. "Monsieur Charles, this was perfect. But why did you never tell Victoria about your abilities?" "Because she needed to discover her own relationship with French culture. If I'd competed with her education, she might never have developed her passion." And now? Now she understands that cultural sophistication isn't about degrees or study abroad programs. It's about respecting people who came before you. Marie-Claire smiled, "Including fathers who built the opportunities you think you earned yourself. Especially fathers who did that." As the evening ended, Victoria approached me alone. "Daddy, I need to understand something." "What's that?" "How long have you owned this castle?" 3 years. "When did you start learning French?" 1989, Army Language School. "When did you start working in France?" 1997. "Your mother's medical bills required international income." Victoria sat down heavily. "Everything I thought I knew about you was wrong." "Not wrong. Incomplete. Will you forgive me?" "Victoria, you're my daughter. There's nothing to forgive. But there's something to remember." "What's that?" "Respect doesn't require translation in any language." She hugged me then, finally seeing her father clearly. The wedding was perfect. But the real celebration was teaching my daughter about assumptions. The morning after Victoria's wedding, French newspapers picked up the story of the American millionaire constructor who'd surprised European aristocracy with his cultural sophistication. Le Figaro's headline, "L'Américain millionaire, construction worker owns castle, speaks perfect French." The article featured photos from the wedding and interviews with Pierre's family about their assumptions about American sophistication. Andre gave a particularly powerful quote. "Charles Bennett reminds us that cultural knowledge cannot be inherited. It must be earned through respect and experience. This American understands French heritage better than many Frenchmen." But the media coverage was just the beginning. Real consequences followed quickly. Pierre's cousin Jean-Philippe, who'd initially dismissed me as the uncultured American father, called 3 days after the wedding. "Monsieur Bennett, I owe you more than an apology. I work for UNESCO's Cultural Heritage Division. Would you consider consulting on our American historical preservation projects? UNESCO wanted my expertise. The International Cultural Organization recognized what my own daughter had missed. Within a week, I received similar offers from the French Ministry of Culture, consulting on Franco-American historical sites, Cambridge University, guest lecturing on cross-cultural construction techniques, National Geographic, featuring Bennett Brothers' castle restoration work. All because people had assumed a construction worker couldn't appreciate culture, then discovered how wrong assumptions could be. But Victoria faced consequences too. Pierre's family loved her, but they'd learned to question her judgment about cultural matters. Pierre's mother called Victoria a week after returning to France. Ma chère Victoria, we need to discuss something important. What's wrong? Not wrong, but surprising. We're reconsidering some wedding arrangements. What arrangements? We'd planned to have our family gatherings conducted mostly in French, assuming your father couldn't participate. Victoria's heart sank. And now? Now we realize we were excluding a fascinating person because we trusted incorrect information about his abilities. I'm so sorry. Victoria, this isn't about apologies. It's about trust. If you misunderstood your own father so completely, how can we trust your assessment of other cultural situations? The question hit hard. Pierre's family wasn't angry. They were confused about Victoria's cultural judgment. Andre was more direct during their next phone call. Victoria, you studied French literature for 4 years, lived in Bordeaux for a year. How did you never discover your father's cultural depth? I never asked. More than that. You never looked. You decided who he was and stopped investigating. I was protecting him. From what? From conversations he was perfectly capable of having? From relationships he'd been building for decades? The painful truth emerged. Victoria hadn't been protecting her father. She'd been protecting her image of herself as the sophisticated family member. Having the culturally simple father made her feel more educated by comparison. Learning about his actual sophistication forced her to reconsider her own cultural authority. Pierre noticed the change immediately. Victoria, you've been quiet since the wedding. What's troubling you? I'm realizing how much I don't know about my own family. What do you mean? My father speaks 3 languages. I speak 2. My father has worked across Europe for 25 years. I studied abroad for 1 year. My father owns historical properties. I work at an art gallery. So? So I spent years thinking I was more sophisticated than him. Pierre sat quietly, processing this revelation about his new wife's self-awareness. Victoria, sophistication isn't about comparison. Then what is it about? Respect for other people's knowledge, even when it's different from yours. The hardest consequence was professional. Victoria's colleagues at the art gallery had heard her stories about her unsophisticated construction worker father for years. She'd used those stories to position herself as the educated family member who'd risen above working-class limitations. When news broke about my castle ownership and cultural expertise, Victoria faced uncomfortable questions. Her supervisor, Helena Morrison, called her into the office. Victoria, I'm confused about something. What's that? For 2 years, you presented yourself as coming from a working-class background that limited your cultural exposure. Yes. But your father owns European historical properties and works in cultural preservation? Victoria sat silently. You've built your professional narrative around overcoming cultural limitations that apparently never existed. Helena, I genuinely didn't know. How do you not know that your father owns Castlex? Good question. How had Victoria managed such complete ignorance about her father's life? I think I assumed construction work meant cultural limitation. You assumed? Based on what? Based on nothing. Based on prejudice. Helena leaned back in her chair. Victoria, we've supported your career development because we believed you brought a unique perspective about accessing culture from working-class backgrounds. I did come from a working-class background. No, you came from a working-class background that provided international cultural exposure. There's a difference. What difference does that make? It means your professional story about cultural access and class barriers isn't authentic. Victoria realized she'd built her career identity on a false narrative about her family's limitations. The art world values authentic stories about cultural background. Discovering that Victoria had misrepresented her family's sophistication damaged her professional credibility. But the deepest consequence was personal. Victoria spent weeks reviewing her childhood, looking for clues about my cultural knowledge she'd missed. She found them everywhere. French architecture books in my office, international business calls conducted in foreign languages, my wine collection featuring specific French regional selections, travel photos from European construction sites. The evidence had been visible for decades. She'd simply chosen not to see it. Pierre helped her understand why. Victoria, you needed to feel like the educated family member. Recognizing your father's sophistication would have complicated that identity. But why did I need that identity? Because it made your achievements feel more significant. Victoria realized she'd diminished her father to elevate herself. Now she had to rebuild their relationship based on reality instead of assumption. The process would take time, but at least now she knew who her father really was. 2 months after the wedding, Victoria called to ask an important question. Daddy, will you teach me about your work in France? Not teach her French. She already spoke French. Teach her about the work I'd been doing for 25 years while she assumed I was culturally limited. Why do you want to know? Because I spent 29 years thinking I knew my father, and I was completely wrong. We met the following Saturday at my office. I'd prepared a presentation about Bennett Brothers' European operations. Victoria sat quietly while I explained our restoration projects, showed photos from castle work, played recorded testimonials from French partners. Daddy, why didn't you ever tell me about this? You never asked. And when you talked about your French studies, you were so excited. I didn't want to overshadow your discoveries. But you could have contributed to my conversations about French culture. I could have. Have? But watching you develop your own relationship with France was more rewarding than demonstrating mine. Victoria reviewed documents from our castle acquisitions. You own 8 properties in France? 7 castles, 1 vineyard. When did you buy the vineyard? Last month. Andre recommended it. She looked up, shocked. Pierre's grandfather helped you buy a vineyard? We've been discussing it since the wedding. He thinks Bennett Brothers should expand into wine tourism. Beau, you and Andre are business partners now? Cultural partnerships often become business partnerships when respect is mutual. Victoria sat back in her chair. I'm still discovering who you are. That's okay. I'm still discovering who you are, too. What do you mean? You're my daughter who speaks beautiful French, appreciates European culture, and has excellent instincts about art, but you're also someone who made assumptions about people based on their professions. I'm working on that. I know you are. Daddy, I need to establish some new boundaries with myself. What kind of boundaries? No more assumptions about people's capabilities based on their work. No more talking about family members without asking them directly about their experiences. Those are good boundaries. And I want to learn about your business. Not just the cultural parts, the construction techniques, the project management, the client relationships. Why? Because you built an international company, and I never bothered to understand how. I smiled. Those conversations will require technical vocabulary. Then I'll learn technical vocabulary in French and English. Victoria? Yes? I'm proud of who you're becoming. 3 months later, Victoria surprised me with news that changed everything. Daddy, I'm leaving the art gallery. Why? I want to work for Bennett Brothers. Specifically, I want to develop our cultural heritage marketing. Cultural heritage marketing? Americans don't know that Bennett Brothers preserves European historical sites. French people don't know you're building bridges between American craftsmanship and European tradition. She was right. We'd focused on doing excellent work without effectively communicating our cultural mission. What would this position involve? Documenting our restoration projects, creating bilingual content about preserving cultural heritage, building relationships between American and European cultural institutions. You want to tell stories about construction work? I want to tell stories about cultural preservation, about respecting heritage while building bridges. Victoria, this work requires a deep understanding of both cultures. Then I'll develop a deep understanding, starting with asking my father questions instead of making assumptions. 6 months later, Victoria published her first article, Building Bridges: How American Construction Expertise Preserves French Heritage. It featured Bennett Brothers' work and included extensive interviews with French partners about cross-cultural collaboration. Andre provided the closing quote. Charles Bennett proves that cultural sophistication cannot be inherited. It must be earned through respect, experience, and humility. Americans and French people both benefit when we abandon assumptions and embrace authentic cultural exchange. But Victoria had learned the lesson completely. Now she builds bridges between cultures professionally, but more importantly, she builds them in our family through respect instead of assumptions. Comment below in any language. Was I right to teach her this lesson? After all, respect doesn't require translation.